Welcome back to Sleep Science Stories. You found your way here tonight, and that means something, because tonight on this Sleep Science story, we are going to talk about the greatest navigators who ever lived, people who found their way across an ocean so vast it covers 1/3 of the entire surface of our planet, using nothing but the stars above them and the water beneath them. And we are going to do it slowly, through calm narration, so that somewhere in the gentle telling of this ancient and wonderful story, sleep finds you and takes you with it. This is your sleep science story for tonight. The Age of Polynesian Navigation. And I am so glad you are here. Before we begin, take a moment to feel where you are right now. The room around you, the surface beneath you, the temperature of the air. Feel the weight of your body settling into the bed. Feel your shoulders release, your jaw unclench, the small muscles around your eyes softening like warm wax in the dim light. There is nowhere you need to be tonight. No decision is waiting. No task unfinished that cannot wait for morning. You are already exactly where you are supposed to be. Let your pillow hold your head completely. Let the weight of your skull settle fully into its softness. Let your blanket hold your warmth and let that warmth sink down into your limbs. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Hold it for just a moment, and breathe out through your mouth, even more slowly, a long quiet exhale that carries something with it, some small tension, some small worry, releasing it into the room. And again. In through the nose, hold, and out through the mouth. Feel your body grow slightly heavier with each exhale, your limbs settling deeper into the surface beneath them. Let your hands lie open and relaxed, fingers slightly curled, the muscles of your face so relaxed that your expression becomes completely neutral, soft, like the face of someone already asleep. Because that is exactly where we are headed. Tonight, through this slow and gentle story, we are going to travel together across one of the most astonishing chapters in all of human history. The Age of Polynesian Navigation. This is the story of a people who looked out at the open ocean, at water that stretched all the way to the horizon in every direction and beyond that horizon for thousands of kilometers more, and decided to sail into it. Not by accident, not carried helplessly away by storms and currents, but deliberately, purposefully, with intention and wisdom and extraordinary skill. Guided by a knowledge so deep and so precise that it still astonishes scientists and historians today. We will drift together through the ancient Pacific night, across seas that shimmer with starlight and the mysterious glow of living things far beneath the surface. We will learn how these navigators memorized the positions of more than 200 stars, how they could feel the direction of deep ocean swells through the hull of a wooden canoe while lying in darkness with their eyes closed, how they followed seabirds toward islands they had never seen before, and found them. We will discover the sacred art of building the great double-hulled voyaging canoe, the vessel that made it all possible. We will explore the ancient oral traditions that kept this knowledge alive across hundreds of generations, encoded in songs and chants that were maps and libraries and instruction manuals all at once. And we will meet a quiet, extraordinary man from a tiny Pacific island who carried the last surviving thread of this knowledge when it was almost gone, and chose to give it back to the world. Along the way, your body will grow heavier, your thoughts will soften and slow, and somewhere in this long and gentle story, sleep will find you. Let your breathing settle now, slow and easy, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. Let every exhale carry a little more tension away from your body and out into the quiet room. We are going to begin at the very beginning, with the great ocean itself, the Pacific Ocean. Even saying those words slowly is enough to evoke something vast and blue and ancient. The Pacific covers 165 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface. That is more than all the land on our entire planet combined. Imagine every mountain range, every desert and rainforest and steppe and city on Earth, and then imagine covering all of that with water, and still needing to add more water because the Pacific is larger even than that. It is the largest single feature on this world. And scattered across it, like seeds thrown with an open hand into an enormous blue field, are islands. Thousands and thousands of islands. Some large and mountainous, their peaks hidden in slow drifting cloud, their flanks green and steep, their valleys full of bird call and the sound of rivers finding their way to the sea. Some barely more than rings of white coral just a few meters above the waterline, low flat atolls where coconut palms lean lazily out over a lagoon so still and so blue it looks like a piece of sky that has fallen and settled gently onto the water. Some rising steeply from deep water and dramatic black cliffs of basalt, sea caves at their base, the ocean surging and booming in the rock, the spray hanging in the air like mist after rain. These islands are spread across an enormous triangle. The corners of what historians and geographers call the Polynesian Triangle sit at Hawaii far to the north, Easter Island far to the east, and New Zealand deep in the southwest. This triangle encloses a vast portion of the Pacific, an area that scholars estimate at somewhere between 16 and 28 million square kilometers of open ocean, more than twice the size of the entire continent of Africa. And every single habitable island inside that triangle was found and settled by the ancestors of the Polynesian people. Let that thought sit with you for a moment. Everyone. No GPS. No compass. No sextant or chronometer. No charts printed on paper with coastlines carefully drawn. No way to send a message or call for help if something went wrong. Just the sky, and the sea, and a body of knowledge so vast and so precisely held that it could take decades to master. Feel the weight of your body sinking gently now, the bed warm and solid beneath you. Your breathing is slow and easy. The world outside is quiet and dark, and somewhere across the back of your imagination, a deep blue ocean is beginning to shimmer. The people who explored and settled this ocean world did not see the sea as an obstacle. They did not see it as a danger to be endured or a void to be crossed with fear. They saw it as something else entirely, a road, a living moving road that connected every island to every other island across the whole wide world, a road paved not with stone but with water and wind and starlight. In Hawaiian the ocean is called Ka Moana Nui, the Great Ocean. In the languages of Polynesia it is always spoken of with a kind of intimacy and love, the way you might speak of a grandmother who has always cared for you, or the oldest of elders whose wisdom you trust without question. And in a very real sense, the ocean was exactly that. The ocean provided food in abundance, fish of every kind, flying fish that leapt silver and sudden from the surface in the early morning light and could be taken with bare hands, turtles drifting through warm blue water near the reef, squid rising in vast silver schools after dark that could be taken with nets in their hundreds. It provided pathways between islands, allowing communities separated by hundreds of kilometers of open water to trade and visit and help one another, to maintain the connections of kinship and culture across distances that to a landlocked people would seem impossible and absolute. And it provided knowledge. The ocean was always speaking, always broadcasting information to those who had trained themselves to receive it. The direction of the swells rolling beneath the hull, the color of the water changing from deep navy to a pale luminous green as a submerged reef rose toward the surface far below, the behavior of seabirds, the way a frigate bird tilted its wings as it caught an updraft over land still far beyond the horizon, the cloud formations that built up like slow white towers over high islands and could be seen from 50 or more kilometers away before the island itself emerged above the sea. The sound of different waters against the hull, the deeper slow boom of a long ocean swell against the bow, versus the choppy irregular slap of waves raised by local wind. The smell of the ocean changing as land grew near, the faint green vegetable richness of shallow water over reef, the scent of flowers carried by warm land wind after rain, the smell of soil and living trees. The ocean spoke in a language, and the navigators of Polynesia learned that language so completely, so fluently, so deeply in their bodies, that they could sail thousands of kilometers through open water and arrive at a specific island, sometimes an island only a few kilometers across, sitting in the middle of an ocean millions of kilometers wide. And this was not something a person learned in a season. It was a lifetime of learning, beginning in early childhood, often beginning before the child could walk. There is another thing worth pausing to consider, something that changes the scale of what these voyages meant. The islands of the Pacific are very small. Most of them are not large landmasses with rivers and mountain ranges and thousands of square kilometers of habitable land. They are specks, atolls barely above the waterline, volcanic peaks rising steeply from the deep water and then falling back into it, small compact worlds where every person knows every other person. Where the resources are limited and the social bonds are tight and everything depends on everything else. To leave one of these islands on a wooden canoe, to sail away until the land behind you disappeared below the horizon and there was nothing in any direction but water and sky, was an act of extraordinary trust. Trust in the navigator. Trust in the canoe. Trust in the accumulated knowledge of generations. And yet they did it, generation after generation, for thousands of years. Not just the brave explorers setting out into the unknown, but families, communities, groups of people carrying their whole world with them in a canoe, prepared to make a permanent new life on an island they had never seen. That level of trust in a system of knowledge. That willingness to place your life and the lives of your children in the hands of a navigator who is reading the stars and feeling the swells, says something profound about what that knowledge was. It was not guesswork dressed up as expertise. It was real, proven by generation after generation of successful arrivals. Breathe in slowly, and out. Let your eyelids grow heavier. Let your thoughts loosen and drift like foam on the surface of a quiet sea. Picture the ocean at night, the true deep dark of open water far from any coast. The surface is not black but a deep luminous blue, and it moves, breathes almost, long slow swells rolling beneath a sky so clear and full of stars that you could reach up and touch them, the reflection of the Milky Way broken and scattered and reformed on the moving water below. The canoe rides those swells with a gentle rise and fall, a slow patient rhythm, like the breathing of something enormous and at rest. The navigator sits at the stern, utterly still, utterly alert, reading everything. This was their home. And to understand how they navigated, we have to first understand where they came from, and how many thousands of years of accumulated wisdom lay behind that stillness at the stern. There is something important to understand about these islands and the people who settled them. The Pacific Islands are not equally distributed. They are not spread in neat rows that make each voyage a short hop from one land to the next. Many of them are separated by hundreds or even thousands of kilometers of open water with nothing in between, no landmarks, no waypoints, no possibility of turning back if something went wrong. And yet, every single one that could sustain human life was found and settled. This tells us something profound about the navigators who accomplished it. It tells us that they did not set out hoping for the best. They set out knowing. Or at least they set out with a confidence so deep and so well founded in real knowledge that it was indistinguishable from knowing. They understood the seasonal patterns of the trade winds, knowing that certain times of year offered more reliable wind in certain directions, and that if they sailed upwind of their target island before turning to run before the wind, they could guarantee that if they overshot they would not drift away from land but toward it. They understood the concept that historians of navigation now call target expansion, the technique of navigating not to a single precise point on the ocean but toward a region, a box, a stretch of water that contained multiple islands, knowing that if they could arrive anywhere in that box they could find a specific island from there with shorter range navigation. Nainoa Thompson, the modern Hawaiian navigator, has described sailing toward Tahiti not as trying to hit a single point 2,500 miles away, but as trying to enter a wide box in the Central Pacific that contained many islands of the Tuamotu archipelago. Any one of those islands would serve as a close-range landmark from which Tahiti could easily be found. This was not a lucky guess. It was strategy, elegant and precise. The ocean was not an obstacle to be overcome by courage. It was a system to be understood and worked with. Feel your body now, completely supported by the surface beneath you, your weight fully released into the bed, the back of your head heavy on the pillow, your shoulders wide and still, your arms lying at your sides without effort. The ocean of your imagining is dark and vast and perfectly still. And somewhere in the darkness, a canoe is moving. Let your body settle even more deeply now. Your muscles releasing in slow waves, from your forehead down through your neck and shoulders, through your back and your arms, down through your hips and your legs, all the way to the soles of your feet. There is no tension left worth keeping. Just rest. Around 5,000 years ago, in the islands that we now call Taiwan and the Philippines, something remarkable began. A seafaring people, speakers of what linguists call the Austronesian family of languages, began to move. They were already skilled sailors, already people who understood the sea and read it and found it navigable. And for reasons that historians can only guess at, perhaps the irresistible pull of curiosity that has always driven human beings toward the unknown horizon, perhaps the practical need for more land and more resources as communities grew on small islands, perhaps simply the deep restless desire to know what lay beyond, they began to push eastward into the Pacific. Island to island, generation to generation. Learning as they went. Each new island became a home for a time, a base of knowledge, and eventually a launching point from which the next generation would sail even further into the blue. Archaeologists traced these early voyagers through a very particular kind of evidence. Pottery. Fired clay vessels decorated with the most intricate and beautiful geometric patterns, incised by tiny toothed stamps pressed into the wet clay before firing, rows of interlocking triangles and chevrons and angular stylized faces, complex repeating designs that suggest a whole spiritual world encoded in clay, patterns that carry meaning the way a language carries meaning. These pots are called lapidaware, and they have been found across an enormous arc of Pacific islands stretching from the Bismarck Archipelago near New Guinea all the way out to Tonga and Samoa, always found in the oldest layers of archaeological sites, always marking the arrival of these seafaring people for the very first time on islands that had never known a human footprint. The term lapida comes from a mishearing by archaeologists in New Caledonia in the 1950s of a local word meaning the place where one digs, and it has become the name by which we know the direct ancestors of the Polynesian people. Feel the coolness of the air on your face, and let your muscles soften a little more with each breath. Somewhere in your imagining the smell of the sea is still present, salt and warmth and something alive in the deep water far below. The lapida did not travel light. Their canoes carried pigs and chickens and dogs, domesticated animals then entirely unknown on the remote Pacific islands they were sailing toward. They carried planting stock, taro and breadfruit and yam and banana and coconut, all carefully selected and wrapped and protected for the voyage, ready to be placed in the soil of a new island the moment a suitable one was found. They were not simply explorers passing through. They were settlers, farmers of the sea and of the land beyond it, carrying entire domestic landscapes with them in the holds of their canoes, determined not just to find new islands but to make them home. By around 3,000 years ago, the lapida had reached Tonga and Samoa, sailing into waters that no human being had ever crossed before, leaving their footprints for the first time on islands that had never known a human step. And then, something interesting happened. They paused. For what researchers estimate to be roughly 1,000 years or perhaps longer, the expansion into the deep Pacific stopped. The communities in Tonga and Samoa grew and changed. The lapida pottery traditions gradually simplified, the elaborate geometric designs fading and simplifying over the generations. Something new was taking shape in their place, something that archaeologists and linguists now call ancestral Polynesian culture. Over those long quiet centuries, the people of Tonga and Samoa were becoming Polynesian. Their language was differentiating from its lapida roots, developing in new directions, finding new words and new ways of speaking that would eventually become the family of languages spoken today from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island. Their social structures were evolving, chieftainships developing, systems of prestige and knowledge and reciprocal obligation taking shape. Their canoe designs were being refined, each generation building on the lessons of the last, improving the hull shapes, experimenting with sail configurations, learning more about how to provision a vessel for very long passages. And their navigation knowledge was deepening. Scholars are not entirely certain why this pause happened when and where it did. It could suggest that the islands further east were simply too remote, too far across open water without reliable seasonal winds to carry voyagers safely there. Or it could be that the communities of Tonga and Samoa were consolidating, taking the time to deepen their knowledge of the ocean and the sky, memorizing more stars, learning to read the sea with greater and greater precision. Because when the expansion began again, it was breathtaking in its speed and its ambition. Within just a few hundred years, somewhere between 700 and 1200 years after the Common Era began, the most remote islands of the entire Pacific were reached and settled. The Cook Islands, the Society Islands, Tahiti and its companions rising green and dramatic from the deep blue, the Marquesas, steep and ancient, Hawaii, 3,000 kilometers to the north, a volcanic archipelago of extraordinary beauty, Easter Island, 3,000 kilometers to the east, the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, a place so remote that the nearest populated land is nearly 2,000 kilometers away across open ocean. And finally, Aotearoa, New Zealand, enormous and green and mountainous and cold, at the very southern tip of the Polynesian world, a land so different from the tropical islands of central Polynesia that the people who found it must have been astonished by what they saw. Every one of these islands was deliberately found, deliberately assessed, and deliberately settled. The canoes that made these voyages carried not just people but entire worlds, taro and breadfruit and coconut carefully packed, pigs and dogs and chickens secured on deck under shelters of woven palm, water stored in sealed gourds, tools and seeds and cuttings for planting. They were not desperate refugees swept away accidentally. These were organized expeditions of extraordinary competence, planned with care, provisioned with foresight, guided by navigators who knew what they were doing. When they arrived at a new island, they were not starting from nothing. They had brought their world with them, the plants and animals and seeds of a whole agricultural tradition packed into the holds of their canoes, ready to be unwrapped and planted and released into the soil and the sky of this new place. And when they had settled, and the next generation grew, and the generation after that, and eventually someone looked out at the horizon and felt that old restless pull toward the unknown. They built canoes, and provisioned them, and began the whole astonishing process again. In the view of archaeologist Patrick Kirch, one of the foremost scholars of Pacific prehistory, the settlement of the Pacific was not a series of accidents but a series of achievements, each one requiring the deliberate application of accumulated knowledge and skill. The Polynesian Triangle covers an ocean area larger than the entire African continent, and every habitable point of it was reached by people in wooden canoes following the stars and the birds and the swells. Breathe out slowly, and let your body sink a little deeper into the softness beneath you. The weight of your limbs is peaceful and heavy. Your thoughts are gentle and slow. Let the image settle in your mind of a great canoe at dawn, moving steadily across a glittering sea, the figures of its crew dark against a sky just beginning to lighten in the east, and somewhere on the horizon ahead, the first faint blue shadow of a mountain no one on board has ever seen before. They are arriving. They have found it. Before we can truly understand the navigation, we must understand the canoe. Because the canoe was not merely a vehicle. It was a living thing, a sacred object, the physical embodiment of a community's accumulated knowledge and courage and love. In the oral traditions of many Polynesian peoples, the great voyaging canoes are spoken of the way you might speak of an ancestor, with reverence, with pride, with the understanding that you exist because of what they carried and where they went. The great voyaging canoes of the Polynesian world were double-hulled. Two full-length hulls placed parallel to each other and lashed together with a platform spanning the space between them. What we would today call a catamaran, though the Polynesian version was shaped and built with thousands of years of oceanic knowledge embedded in every curve. The hulls were narrow and beautifully formed. Their underwater profile was smooth and continuous, a flowing unbroken curve from bow to stern with no abrupt angles that would snag the water and create turbulence and drag. The bows were fine and gentle, rising smoothly, the stems curved slightly upward at the very tip to lift over approaching waves rather than burying into them. The volume of each hull was slightly greater in the rear section than in the forward section, a subtle asymmetry not obvious to the eye but felt immediately by the water. It counteracted the tendency of a sailing vessel to squat lower at the stern when driven hard before a following wind, keeping the canoe level and fast through all conditions. They were fast. The European explorer Captain James Cook, sailing his well-built vessel Endeavour through the waters around Tahiti in the 1700s, observed the large Tahitian double canoes keeping pace alongside his ship and at times drawing ahead of it. He noted with admiration that their large canoes seemed able to sail much faster than the Endeavour itself. Some of the great Fijian and Tongan double canoes were among the largest wooden sailing vessels of their era anywhere on Earth. One famous type of Fijian double canoe called Ndrua could reach 36 meters in length, slightly longer than Cook's own Endeavour at 33 meters. Some of these great vessels reportedly carried more than 200 people along with all their supplies and goods. For long-distance voyaging across the open Pacific, the double-hulled canoes were somewhat smaller, typically around 20 meters, but even these could carry 50 or 60 people alongside livestock and planting stock and supplies for a passage of several weeks, and they were capable of covering 150 to 250 kilometers in a single good day of sailing when the trade winds were running. Feel your own body now, the smoothness of the surface beneath you, the gentle warmth of your covering. Let your breath move slowly and evenly, in and out. The room is quiet. The night is still. The building of a voyaging canoe was not merely carpentry. It was a sacred act from the very beginning. Before the first tree was selected for felling, priests were consulted, auguries were read and the movement of birds and the pattern of dreams. The right tree was identified through spiritual as well as practical criteria. The felling itself was accompanied by chanting and prayer, acknowledging the spirit of the tree and requesting its willingness to become a vessel that would carry human lives across the deep ocean. The great hulls were carved from single enormous logs. In Hawaii, the koa tree was most prized, its dense reddish-brown grain beautiful and resistant to salt water and the stresses of open ocean sailing. Breadfruit wood was used for hulls in many island groups, lightweight but remarkably resilient. In the Marquesas and Tahiti, craftsmen sought the straightest and largest available trees, sometimes traveling considerable distances to find timber of exactly the right quality. Once a tree was felled, the rough shaping began immediately at the site of felling, reducing the weight before the long haul back toward the shore. Teams of men pulled the partially shaped log across the ground on rollers cut from saplings, sometimes hundreds of people involved in moving a single hull, the work accompanied by chanting that kept the rhythm and maintained the sense of sacred purpose. The final shaping was done by master craftsmen using stone adzes and shell tools, working the wood down by feel as much as by sight, knowing by touch and long experience exactly when the whole walls had reached the right thickness, thin enough to reduce weight, thick enough to bear the stresses of the open sea. The two finished hulls were connected by crossbeams, long horizontal spars that bridged the gap between them. These crossbeams were lashed in place with cordage braided from the fibrous husks of coconuts, or with the inner bark of the olona plant in Hawaii, a fiber of extraordinary tensile strength. And here is the insight at the heart of this construction. The lashings were not rigid. Not like metal bolts or wooden pegs driven tight, but flexible, allowing the entire structure to breathe and flex subtly as each wave passed beneath it. A rigid structure in the heavy ocean swell of the open Pacific would eventually crack at its joints as the stresses of wave after wave accumulated and concentrated. But a structure that could flex with the ocean, that could absorb the energy rather than fighting it, could survive indefinitely, could take whatever the Pacific sent and still arrive. Breathe slowly now, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the rhythm of your breathing be as steady and gentle as the long Pacific swell. The deck between the hulls was surfaced with light planks or woven matting, and on longer voyages a small shelter was built there, a low hut of poles covered with pandanus leaf thatch, providing shade from the relentless tropical sun and protection from spray and rain, and a place where the crew could sleep in rotation through the long hours of an ocean passage. Think about what it was like to lie in that shelter in the middle of the ocean night. The deck moving beneath you with the slow rhythm of the swell, the stars visible through the open ends of the shelter, the sound of water always present, the creak of the lashings, the hum of the rigging. Sleep came easily out there for those who were accustomed to it. The motion of the canoe was like being rocked, the sound of the water was like music. The cold trade wind coming in from the northeast was the most natural blanket in the world. The crew slept in shifts, and when it was their turn to sleep they slept completely, knowing that the navigator was awake and watching and that the canoe was safe in those hands. That trust was not blind. It was earned, built over years of watching, of seeing the navigator make the right call in the right moment, of arriving at the right island when no one else could have found it. The trust that allowed the crew to sleep while the navigator watched was one of the most important things the navigator possessed. More important perhaps than any individual skill or any piece of knowledge. Because a navigator who could not earn that trust, who could not create in their crew a calm and confident willingness to rest while the canoe was being guided through the dark, could not have kept any crew alive for a voyage of weeks across the open Pacific. the ability to project calm, to communicate through stillness and steadiness that everything was as it should be, that the stars were where they were expected and the swell was reading correctly and the canoe was on course. This too was a skill. This too was something that had to be learned. And it too was transmitted through years of apprenticeship, through watching the master navigate in darkness and overcast and storm and doldrums, watching the master remain calm and focused and certain when everything was uncertain. Learning that the ocean could always be read if you were trained to read it. And that being trained to read it was the work of a lifetime. The sails of the ancient voyaging canoes were among the most distinctive features of Polynesian maritime technology. The most ancient form was the crab claw sail. Imagine a roughly triangular sail with its pointed apex at the bottom, mounted on two curved spars that spread it above the mast like the open claw of a great crab. This shape was aerodynamically brilliant. It could be set to catch wind at angles that a conventional square sail could never use, allowing the canoe to sail much closer to the wind and make progress upwind in ways that many early European observers assumed was impossible for such a craft. And the open fork shape at the very top of the sail had an additional function, a safety feature built into the design through long experience. It allowed excess wind to escape when the pressure became too great, acting as a natural relief valve, preventing any catastrophic capsize that could end a voyage. Steering was done with long paddles worked from the stern, some of them 6 or more meters in length, held deep in the water where the resistance acted as both rudder and keel, preventing the canoe from being pushed sideways across the ocean by beam winds. Picture the canoe at sea now, the crab claw sail filled and pulling, curving against the blue sky, the twin bows rising and falling over the long Pacific swell, the rigging humming softly with the wind's effort, the deck warm underfoot in the afternoon sun, and somewhere at the stern, always, the navigator watching. Breathe in that imagined salt air. Let your body be still and heavy and peaceful. These vessels were not built in days or weeks. A great voyaging canoe could take a year or more to complete, and the entire community participated in the building and the blessing and the launching, contributing labor and food and prayer and song. They had names. They had histories. They were spoken of in genealogies and sacred chants the way a human ancestor would be spoken of, because they were ancestors in the deepest sense of that word. Without the canoe there is no Polynesia. Without the canoe those islands remain empty and silent in the blue. With the canoe, the greatest maritime civilization the ancient world ever produced could reach from one end of the Earth's largest ocean to the other, and know exactly where they were. Close your eyes now if they are not already closed. Imagine a night sky as you have almost certainly never seen it in your life. No city glow on the horizon. No aircraft blinking overhead. No moon tonight to wash the fainter stars to invisibility. Just the absolute breathtaking canopy of the stars over open ocean, so far from any land that there is not a single human light anywhere on the full 360 degrees of the world around you. There are so many stars that the sky seems to glow from within, as if the darkness itself is lit. The Milky Way is not a faint smudge at the edge of visibility but a blazing river of silver light stretching from one horizon to the other, a width and depth and luminosity that makes it look almost solid, the dense ancient core of our galaxy visible as a bright central band within it. Every individual star is sharp and clear and still, each one holding its place with perfect steadiness. No shimmer, no blur, just that pure cold light burning through the unbroken dark. This is the sky the Polynesian navigators knew. They knew it the way you know the face of someone you have loved since before memory. Every star a landmark. Every rising point on the horizon a compass bearing. Every arc across the sky a course to steer by. The most fundamental tool of Polynesian wayfinding was not a physical instrument at all. No astrolabe. No magnetic compass. No sextant or chronometer or chart. It was a mental construct, a map carried entirely inside the navigator's own mind, built and maintained by decades of observation and memorization and practical experience at sea. The star compass. Imagine the full circle of the horizon, the place where the ocean meets the sky all the way around you. Divide that full circle into 32 equal sections, each section called a house. Each house is separated from the next by 11¼ degrees of arc. Together they complete the full 360 degrees of the world. Each house has a name. The 4 cardinal points are their own houses. East is called Hikina in Hawaiian, meaning to arrive, for this is the side from which the stars emerge, the arriving horizon where all celestial bodies come into the world of the navigator's sky. West is Komohana, meaning to enter, for this is where the stars go when they set below the sea. The houses between the cardinal points have their own names too, each name carrying its own quiet poetry. La is the sun's house on either side of due east and due west. Aina means land. Noyo is the turn. Manu is the bird. Nalani is the heavens. Nalio is the voices, and Haka is the empty. And through every single house on that great mental compass, the stars travel. Stars always rise in the east and set in the west, and they do so with perfect consistency, night after night, year after year. Each star has its own precise rising point and its own precise setting point on that horizon circle, and those points never change. A master navigator had memorized not just dozens but hundreds of these rising and setting points. Nainoa Thompson, the great modern Hawaiian navigator whose story we will come to in time, has spoken of working with knowledge of around 220 stars, enough that through every night, regardless of which part of the sky was clouded over, there was always a star just rising or just setting at the horizon that could give a precise bearing. The technique was elegantly simple in concept but requiring extraordinary discipline and practice. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, the navigator identified the stars still low on the eastern horizon, rising stars whose position on the compass could be read most precisely because they were still close to the horizon point where they had emerged from the ocean. As the night deepened, those stars rose higher in the sky, their bearing becoming less precise as their movement carried them away from the horizon, and the navigator shifted attention to new stars just rising in their place, a continuous relay, one star after another through all the long hours of the night. When a star rose too high, another took its place. When that one rose too high, another took its. An unbroken chain of light from dusk to dawn. The navigator did not just know where the stars rose and set. They knew the whole story of each star's night, how it rose at the horizon, climbed, reached its peak, descended, and finally set, a complete arc known and memorized for hundreds of stars, so that at any moment of any night the navigator could look at a star's position in the sky and tell not just its direction but roughly what time it was and how the night had progressed. Nainoa Thompson has described the experience of navigating by stars as a kind of three-dimensional awareness of the whole sky, not watching one star at a time but holding the pattern of all visible stars in the mind simultaneously, a continuous awareness of the turning sphere above you and your position within it. He has said that after enough practice, you stop thinking about the stars as individual objects and begin to experience the sky as a single coherent system that rotates around you, a system you are inside of and a part of, rather than something you are looking up at from below. This is what the ancient navigators were doing. Not consulting a tool, not reading an instrument, inhabiting the sky. Feel the warmth of your blanket now, and let your body grow heavier with each slow breath. The sky above you in this imagining is vast and turning. The stars will slowly in their great arc. The ocean breathes beneath the canoe. At sunrise, the navigator noted with great precision the exact point on the horizon where the sun emerged from the sea, observing whether it rose slightly north or south of due east, and reading from that observation information about the season and their latitude. Through the middle of the day, the arc of the sun across the sky maintained a continuous sense of north and south, its highest point at noon always indicating the direction of the nearest pole, and the navigator used the rate and angle of that arc to refine their sense of where in the world they were. At sunset, again, the precise position of the setting sun on the western horizon gave another bearing and another confirmation. So from the first light of dawn to the last light of dusk, and through every hour of the clear Pacific night, the navigator was never without direction. Latitude, knowing how far north or south of the equator a canoe had sailed, could be measured by observing how high certain stars rose at their peak, or by holding the outstretched fingers of one hand at arm's length against the sky and measuring the angle between the horizon and Polaris, the North Star, which sits almost exactly above the Earth's North Pole and appears to barely move while all the other stars will around it. Each island had a known latitude, a specific angle of certain stars, a known height of the Southern Cross at its standing position in the southern sky. A navigator could use the technique of sailing down the latitude, sailing first north or south until they reached the latitude of their destination island, and then running east or west along that latitude line until the island appeared. This transformed the enormous challenge of finding a small island in a vast ocean into something systematic and achievable, something that brilliant trained minds could accomplish with consistent reliability. Because they knew where every island lived in the sky. And the sky never moved. The latitudes of the major island groups were known and memorized. Tahiti lives at a certain latitude. Hawaii lives at a certain latitude. New Zealand lies further south still. Easter Island sits at its own precise latitude, and a navigator who could determine their own latitude from the stars could sail with confidence to the right band of ocean and then search within it. This is what the great navigators meant when they spoke of the sky as a map. It was not a metaphor. It was a literal description of how navigation worked. The sky was a map and every island had its address in that map, written in the height of a star and the angle of a cross and the arc of the moon. Breathe out slowly, and let your thoughts soften, becoming less distinct, less attached to anything, dissolving gently into the quiet dark like stars at dawn. The ocean is never still. Even on the calmest day, even when the surface appears smooth as hammered silver in the still midday heat, there are swells moving beneath it. Great long rhythmic pulses of energy, set in motion by distant storms sometimes hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away, that have been traveling steadily through the open ocean for days or weeks, losing none of their direction, none of their patient purpose. These are called ocean swells, and they are entirely different from the chaotic surface waves raised by local wind. Waves respond immediately to every gust and shift of the nearby breeze. They are choppy and confused, constantly changing, unreliable as a compass. But swells have memory. They were made far away and they travel in a straight, consistent direction for vast distances, persisting long after the storm that generated them has dissipated and been forgotten thousands of kilometers behind. If the northeasterly trade winds have been blowing strongly somewhere out over the open Pacific for a week, the swells they generated will continue rolling toward the southwest with absolute reliability for days after the wind itself has changed, carrying that directional information faithfully through all the water they pass through. A skilled navigator standing or sitting at the stern of a canoe could feel those swells beneath their feet, sense their direction and their rhythm with their body the way you might sense a slight current of warm air moving through a darkened room. Knowing without needing to look, without needing to think about it consciously, which direction the distant storm had blown. And more than direction, an experienced navigator could feel multiple swells at the same time. The dominant trade swell, long and regular, rolling in from the northeast. The secondary swell from a different direction, perhaps the remnant of a distant weather system now long past, slightly shorter, slightly less regular. The two swells intersecting and combining, creating a complex textured motion under the hull that told a story about the ocean's recent history and about the geography of what lay ahead, because islands do something remarkable to ocean swells. When a long ocean swell encounters an island, part of it is reflected back, bouncing away from the shore the way a sound echo bounces away from a stone cliff. Part of it is refracted, bent around the island in curved paths that continue out the other side, altered, changed, but still carrying information about what they have passed. A navigator familiar with a particular island group could detect its presence through swell patterns long before the island itself became visible, sometimes hundreds of kilometers out. The subtle changes in the texture and timing of the motion under the hull telling them that land was somewhere ahead and slightly to the left, or that they had drifted slightly east of their intended track and needed to correct. There is a way of describing this that the navigator Nainoa Thompson has used. He said that when Mao taught him about swell reading, Mao told him that if you can read the ocean you will never be lost. Not the stars, not the birds, not the clouds. The ocean. The thing that is always there even when everything else is hidden. The swells roll through fog, they roll through rain, they roll through the darkness of overcast nights when not a single star is visible on the horizon and the sky are both the same color of nothing. The swells do not care about cloud cover. They do not care about time of day. They simply roll, patient and consistent, carrying their directional information through all the water of the Pacific, and a navigator who has learned to read them can be found anywhere. In the darkness of the hull, in the overcast of the tropics, in any condition the ocean can produce. Still found. Still oriented. Still knowing. Feel the texture of your bed beneath you now, the slight give of the mattress supporting your weight, the familiar pressure of the surface beneath your body. Let that awareness dissolve into the deeper feeling of simply resting, simply being held by something solid and safe. The most extraordinary account of swell reading comes from the life of the master navigator Maupielug, the man who would later help revive Polynesian navigation in the modern age. In darkness so complete that neither stars nor waves could be seen, no light anywhere, the kind of tropical overcast that is absolute and total and presses down on the ocean like a ceiling of black cloth. Mao would lie down inside the hull of the canoe itself, pressing his body directly against the wooden planking, and read the movement of the ocean through the structure of the vessel. The swells translated through the wood into his body, their direction and rhythm and the subtle ways in which they interfered with each other becoming a picture in his mind, a three-dimensional map of the ocean around him felt rather than seen. He had learned this beginning in infancy, his grandfather placing him in the tidal pools around the island of Satol, letting him sit in the water and feel, letting the ocean's motion speak to him through his skin before he was old enough to understand in any formal sense what he was being taught. The first years were not lessons. They were immersion. The ocean entering the child through the body. There was one more phenomenon the navigators knew about, more mysterious than all the others. A phenomenon that still puzzles modern researchers today. They called it Teilapa, which translates roughly as flashing light, or darts of light. Navigator after navigator across Polynesia and Micronesia described it the same way, a light seen just beneath the surface of the ocean at night. Not scattered and diffuse like the familiar greenish bioluminescence that glows and swirls through a ship's wake when the water is disturbed by movement, but focused, directional, like the beam of a torch shining up through deep water, moving in a specific direction. The direction of the nearest land. According to accounts gathered by researchers in the 20th century, Teilapa could be detected from as far as 130 kilometers from shore, appearing as faint but fast-moving flashes just below the surface, visible only on very dark overcast nights, unaffected by surface waves or rain or cloud. What causes it is not fully understood even today. Some researchers suggest it may be related to bioluminescent organisms, tiny sea creatures that produce their own cold light, responding to the energy disturbances created when deep ocean swells interact with underwater reef formations near the bases of islands, their combined light concentrated and given direction by those physical structures. Others have proposed connections to the subtle electrical activity associated with underwater volcanic formations. Whatever its origin, navigator after navigator across thousands of years reported using Teilapa to find their way toward land in conditions where every other guide had failed. The ocean was speaking, always speaking, in light and movement and subtle pattern, to those who had devoted their lives to learning its language. Breathe in and out. Let the darkness around you be friendly and still. Let the weight of your body be something comfortable and safe. The ocean of your imagining is peaceful tonight, a long slow swell rolling beneath a starlit sky, carrying you quietly further and further into rest. The ocean was full of life. And life was one of the most important navigation tools the ancient voyagers possessed. Birds. The birds of the Pacific knew where land was, always, instinctively and without error. And for a navigator in open ocean hundreds of kilometers from any shore, a bird could be the most reliable guide of all. Most seabirds cannot rest on open water. Their feathers lack the waterproofing of waterfowl. They must return to land every night to roost and nest and care for their young. This means that a bird seen at sea in the afternoon is almost certainly heading toward land before darkness falls, and if you watch the direction it flies, it will point you toward an island. Different species carry different meanings. The golden plover, a beautiful shorebird with golden-flecked feathers and long slender wings, was known to migrate between the Society Islands and Hawaii, and its migration route was a known pathway for voyagers making that same long crossing. The long-tailed cuckoo migrates from tropical Polynesia to New Zealand each year as the southern summer approaches, its departure direction pointing south toward the Great Green Islands at the far edge of the Polynesian world. A navigator watching these birds depart knew without question that land lay in the direction they flew. The knotty tern, compact and dark with a pale gray cap, rarely ventures further than about 50 kilometers from land, making the first sighting of a knotty almost a declaration that an island was close, perhaps visible from the top of the mast if not yet from the deck. The white tern, small and purely white and unmistakable against the blue sky, also stays close to land, and it was white terns skimming the water near the horizon that told the navigator Malpielug that the atoll of Matahaiva was near during the great 1976 voyage, before any land could be seen. The frigate bird with its spectacular wingspan of more than 2 meters and its deeply forked tail was perhaps the most useful of all navigation birds. Its feathers are not waterproof, it cannot rest on the surface of the ocean. If released at sea it will fly directly toward the nearest land without hesitation, and the navigator follows in its wake. Some accounts suggest that navigators kept frigate birds aboard their canoes in specially made perches, caring for them through the voyage and releasing them when they thought land might be near. Breathe out slowly now, and feel your body soften a little more with each exhale. The stars are thick above your imagined ocean. The canoe moves softly. Somewhere overhead a frigate bird circles on motionless wings, a dark silhouette against the luminous night sky, tilting its long forked tail, pointing toward something just beyond the horizon. But birds were only one part of the living navigation system. The clouds were another. Clouds form over islands. When warm moist air from the ocean surface rises over a landmass, it cools as it ascends, and that cooling causes water vapor to condense into cloud. A high volcanic island with mountains will almost always carry a cap of cloud resting against its peaks, sometimes stationary when all the clouds around it are moving with the wind, the island wearing its cloud the way a figure wears a hat. This cap cloud could be seen from 50 kilometers or more away, long before the island itself broke the horizon. The navigator who knew what to look for could read it as clearly as a sign. A low coral atoll rises only a few meters above the water, too low and flat to create orographic cloud in the same way. But even here the clouds give the island away. The shallow turquoise water of the lagoon reflects light upward into the clouds floating above it, and a navigator who knew what they were looking for could detect the distinctive greenish or turquoise glow on the undersides of those clouds from many kilometers away, a faint but unmistakable coloring that said, "There is shallow water here, a lagoon, land." After a rainstorm over a forested island, debris washed out to sea, leaves and branches and coconut husks carried by the outflow of freshened water, perhaps a log still rooted in its soil. The texture and color of the ocean surface changed near land after rain, and a careful navigator reading those signs could determine not just that land was near but roughly how far away and in what direction. The winds themselves were a compass and a clock. The great trade winds of the tropical Pacific blow from the northeast above the equator and from the southeast below it, with remarkable consistency season after season. They could be relied upon not only to drive the canoe across the ocean but to maintain a steady reference direction throughout any voyage. When the trade winds shifted, even slightly, the navigator noticed immediately, registered the change, and began reading additional signs to understand what it meant. Was a storm approaching from a new direction? Had the canoe drifted into a different band of wind near a large island group that was altering the local pattern? Had they crossed a major boundary between wind systems that would tell them something useful about their latitude? And there was one more gift the living ocean gave the navigators at night. Bioluminescence. On certain nights, particularly in the warm tropical waters of the Pacific, the ocean glows. The glow is produced by microscopic living organisms, single-celled creatures so small they cannot be seen individually, but so numerous that when they are disturbed by the movement of the canoe they produce a cold ghostly light, greenish-blue and soft, trailing behind the hull in curling patterns, appearing at the bow in a continuous burst of living fire as the canoe cuts through the water. Every stroke of the paddle releases a spiral of green light that fades slowly. The wake of the canoe is marked by a ghost trail of fading brightness stretching back toward the darkness. A navigator moving through bioluminescent water at night could see the pattern of currents in the glow, the way the light swirled and eddied, showing where the water moved differently, showing where a current boundary lay, where two bodies of water with different temperatures met in the dark. And the bioluminescence sometimes showed them other things too, schools of fish below the surface, the disturbed water around a reef far below, the presence of large animals moving through the deep. The ocean gave light to those who knew how to receive it. And when all else failed, when cloud covered the sky and the trade winds stalled in the equatorial doldrums and even the swells were confused, the experienced navigator heaved to, took down the sail, and waited. Reading, watching, feeling. And when the pattern became clear again, set off once more. Think for a moment about what it meant to hold all of this at once. To be simultaneously reading the position of the stars and the angle of their rise, noting the direction of the primary swell under the hull, watching the flight direction of the birds at dusk, reading the clouds above the horizon, sensing the temperature of the wind on the skin, smelling the slight sweetness of vegetation on a land breeze, reading the color of the water ahead. And synthesizing all of it, continuously, without instruments, without calculation, through pure pattern recognition built by decades of training and experience. This is what the greatest navigators could do. And what is most remarkable about it is that it was not experienced as a series of separate tasks. It was experienced as a single unified awareness. A relationship with the ocean so complete and so intimate that the navigator and the sea were almost a single thing. The way a skilled musician does not think about individual notes but hears the whole shape of the music. The way a master craftsman does not think about the tool in their hand but feels the grain of the wood through it. The navigator did not think about the swell. They felt the ocean, and the ocean told them where they were. Let your own body now receive the signal that the night is sending you, the gentle insistent pull towards sleep, deep and warm and still. Your thoughts are drifting loose from their moorings, floating softly, easily, without urgency. The night wraps around you like still water, all of this knowledge. The stars and the swells, the birds and the clouds, the winds and the currents and the mysterious light below the surface, had to be learned. And learning it took a lifetime. In Polynesian societies across the Pacific, the navigators were among the most important and the most deeply respected people in their communities. In the Caroline Islands of Micronesia, the master navigator holds the title of Palu. In Hawaiian tradition, the navigator is a kahuna, a keeper of sacred knowledge. In many island communities across the Pacific, the Guild of Navigators was one of the most carefully maintained and closely guarded institutions in the entire society. Because in practical terms, the navigator's knowledge was the difference between the survival of the community in its slow decline, between being able to reach another island in times of shortage and being stranded on a small atoll when the fish failed and the rains did not come. On small islands with limited resources, the ability to sail to another island to trade for food, or to find help in a time of disaster, or to carry people away when drought or storm or disease struck, was not merely admirable. It was essential. The Guild of Navigators could do what no one else could do, and so they were regarded accordingly. The training began in infancy. There is an account of the great Micronesian navigator Malpielug being taken as a baby, barely old enough to sit upright, to the tidal pools around his home island of Sado by his grandfather, and placed in the water. Not to swim, not as play, but to feel. To feel the movement of the water against his skin, the subtle pull of the tidal current around the rocks, the way the swells arrived in different patterns from different directions as the weather changed, the texture of each small wave as it passed, and the texture of the quieter water between waves. His grandfather was not teaching navigation in any formal sense. He was beginning a process that would take decades, the slow, deep imprinting of the ocean onto the child's body, so that as the boy grew, the sea would feel as natural and as readable as the ground beneath his feet. At the age of 4, Mal began sailing with his grandfather. Around the age of 18, after more than a decade of training and sea experience, he had earned the title of Master Navigator. Feel the air around you now, cool and still. Let your breath move slowly, in and out. The night is peaceful and very deep. There is nowhere to hurry to, nothing left to learn tonight, just this gentle story settling over you like a warm and gentle covering. The formal training of a Polynesian navigator involved years of study combining deep memorization with constant practical experience at sea. There were the stars to memorize, hundreds of them, not just their names but their rising and setting positions on each point of the star compass, their behavior at different times of year, which stars were available in which seasons and which could be used for latitude and which were primarily directional guides. There were the swell patterns to learn. Not just the dominant trade swells but the secondary swells, the counter swells that bounced back from large islands, the way different sea states felt against the hull at different angles, the subtle difference between a northeast swell and a north-northeast swell felt only by lying inside the hull in darkness and pressing the body against the wood. There were the birds to learn, their names and ranges and habits and the meaning of their behavior at different distances from land. There were the wind patterns, the currents, the cloud formations, the color of the water in different conditions, the smell of different kinds of ocean air. And there were the routes. Each major inter-island route had its own detailed description, a specific star sequence to follow, a characteristic swell pattern to maintain, birds to watch for and cloud formations to expect near the destination, a series of waypoints and confirmations that would tell a navigator they were on track or needed to correct. And now here is the question that is one of the most beautiful questions in all of human history. How was all of this transmitted? Without writing, without paper charts, without any physical record that could be consulted. Through song, through chant, through story. Navigation knowledge was encoded in chants that described routes in poetic terms. A chant might describe a voyage as a journey through a sequence of star houses, naming each star in the order it would be used as the night progressed, while weaving in the expected swell patterns and the birds to watch for and the cloud formations that would announce the destination. The song was not merely beautiful, it was a precise technical document, a memory palace built from rhythm and melody that a navigator could recall with perfect fidelity even in the exhaustion and sensory complexity of a long ocean crossing. The human brain is extraordinarily good at retaining information that has been set to rhythm and melody. Far better than it retains the same information presented as a list or a diagram. This is not a modern discovery, it is an ancient one, and the navigators of Polynesia exploited it with extraordinary skill. A navigator who had learned their star sequences and swell patterns and bird flight paths through song could recall them reliably even in the conditions of a long ocean crossing, even in exhaustion, even in the disorientation of a storm, even in the middle of the night after days at sea without proper sleep. The song was still there. Always there. The great oral traditions of the Pacific were not merely stories for entertainment. They were libraries. They were maps. They were instruction manuals written in the language that the human mind finds naturally easiest to hold, the language of music and rhythm and narrative. Creation stories embedded the positions of stars and the geography of island groups into tales of gods and heroes, so that a child hearing a myth about the hero Maui or the great ancestral navigator Cuyp was simultaneously absorbing real geographical and navigational information encoded in the story's imagery, learning the shape of the Pacific the way we learn the shape of letters, through repetition and pattern and the deep satisfaction of something beautiful and meaningful. Before a major voyage, the crew would chant together, reciting the route aloud, confirming the star sequence, honoring the ancestors who had sailed it before them. The chant was not performance. It was preparation. It was community. When the crew chanted together before a voyage, they were not simply rehearsing technical information. They were becoming one entity, weaving themselves into a single being that would function together on the ocean, each person carrying in their body and their voice the same story, the same map, the same ancestors. The chant was the community's accumulated wisdom being spoken aloud one more time to make it real, to confirm it, to keep it alive for another generation. And for the young apprentice hearing these chants year after year from childhood, the knowledge did not feel like something learned. It felt like something remembered. Something that had always been there. Let your mind drift now, like a canoe unmoored from the dock, drifting softly on calm water without effort. The images in this story dissolve gently into one another, stars and waves and the sound of singing just barely audible over the sound of the sea. There was another crucial aspect of navigation knowledge that was never written down, for a very different reason. It was secret. The most advanced techniques, the most precise star sequences for difficult routes, the ability to feel Lapa, the full map of the deep ocean's swell patterns around an entire island group, these were transmitted only within the navigator guilds, only from master to chosen apprentice, only after years of demonstrated trust and ability and commitment. To share this knowledge with outsiders was considered a serious transgression against the guild and against the community that depended on the guild's exclusive knowledge. And this is what makes the story of the modern revival of Polynesian navigation so remarkable. Because when the knowledge was almost gone, one man made the extraordinary decision to share what had never been shared. And in doing so, he gave it back to the ocean. By the middle of the 20th century, something terrible had happened to Polynesian navigation. The knowledge was dying. Across most of the Pacific, the traditional art of wayfinding had faded over the previous 100 years, as the influence of Western technology and Western schooling gradually reshaped island life. Modern boats with compasses and motors and eventually GPS made the ancient skills seem unnecessary. Younger generations had no practical reason to spend years learning to read the stars when modern instruments could keep them safe. By around 1970, it was estimated that there were only 6 living people on Earth who still possessed the complete traditional knowledge of open ocean wayfinding. 6 people. All of them lived on 2 tiny coral islands in the Caroline Islands of Micronesia, Satawal and Puliawat. Several of these 6 were already too elderly to go to sea. The most gifted was a quiet and compact man named Pius Pielug. But everyone who knew him called him Mao. The name meant strength or hardness in the Satawalese language, and those who knew him said the name described both his powerful build, the ridges of muscle across his back that some compared to the rough shell of a hawksbill turtle, and his unbreakable determination, his refusal to stop, his willingness to be at sea even in bad weather when others went ashore. Mao was born in the village of Waizo on the small coral island of Satawal in the year 1932. His grandfather had chosen him as an infant to carry the navigational tradition, not randomly but because he saw in the child the qualities a navigator must possess: patience, quiet attention, a willingness to feel the world rather than simply observe it from a distance. From the moment of that choosing, every aspect of Mao's childhood was shaped toward the ocean. He was placed in tidal pools before he could walk. He began sailing with his grandfather at the age of 4. As a young man he voyaged throughout the Caroline Islands, never losing his way, building and deepening his knowledge through thousands of miles of open ocean sailing, making the long crossing to Saipan and back, navigating between the scattered atolls of Micronesia by the stars and the swells as his grandfather had taught him. Around the age of 18, he had undergone the Po ceremony, the sacred and formal induction into the Guild of Master Navigators, a ceremony that had not been held on Satowal for many years before his initiation, and would not be held again for another 56 years after it. He was the youngest Palu in Micronesia. And as the years passed, he watched the knowledge dying around him. He watched the younger generations turn toward motorboats and Western instruments, saw the interest in apprenticeship growing fewer with each passing year, understood that when his generation was gone, the knowledge would be gone with them, and the ocean would fall silent. He made his decision. He would share the knowledge, even though sharing it violated the oaths of his guild. Even though some of his own community on Satowal would criticize him for it. Even though the people he would share it with were from a different culture and a different tradition. He decided that the survival of the knowledge was more important than the secrecy of the knowledge. And that decision changed the history of the Pacific. Feel the heaviness of deep rest now settling through your body like warm water. The night is very quiet. Your breathing is slow and even, in and out, like the breathing of the sea on a still morning. Far away on the other side of the Pacific, a group of Hawaiian scholars and adventurers had been asking the same question from the other direction. The evidence of archaeology and genetics and language made it clear that the ancestors of the Hawaiian people had sailed deliberately from the Society Islands, from Tahiti, thousands of kilometers to the south and east. They had made that voyage with intention and skill, guided by knowledge of the sky and the sea that no one in Hawaii any longer possessed. In the early 1970s, a cultural anthropologist named Ben Finney, an artist and historian named Herb Cain, and a sailor named Tommy Holmes came together with a shared determination to find out what that ancient voyaging had truly looked like. They began raising funds across the Hawaiian Islands, gathering craftsmen, studying old drawings made by the companions of Captain Cook when he had encountered Polynesian canoes in the 1700s. And on the 8th of March in 1975, the double-hulled voyaging canoe Hākule was launched on the waters of Kaneohe Bay on the island of Oahu. Her name means Star of Gladness in Hawaiian. It refers to the star Arcturus, which passes directly overhead at the latitude of the Hawaiian Islands, a celestial marker that tells any navigator returning from the south, "You are here, you are at the right latitude, your home is near." The Hākule was 61 feet long, built of plywood and fiberglass in the proportions and design of the ancient canoes, with twin crab-claw sails and her long steering paddle. There was only one problem. No one in Hawaii knew how to navigate her without instruments. The knowledge was gone. It was Ben Finney who tracked down Maupielug in Micronesia through a network of researchers and connections, and extended the invitation to navigate the Hākule on her first great voyage. Mau hesitated, considered, and agreed. On the 1st of May in 1976, the Hākule set sail from Honolua Bay on the island of Maui, bound for Tahiti, approximately 2,500 miles to the south and slightly east. Mao sat at the stern of the canoe, almost always in the same position, watching the stars rise and set through the nights, feeling the swell through the hole through the days, keeping in his mind at every moment a complete and constantly updated picture of where they were and where they were going. The voyage took 34 days. There was a week spent nearly becalmed in the equatorial doldrums where the trade winds fail and the ocean lies flat and hot under a blazing sun. There was an encounter with headwinds south of the equator that threatened to push them west of Tahiti. But Mao read it all. And on the 4th of June 1976, small white terns skimming the water near the horizon told Mao that land was close before the atoll of Matahaiva could yet be seen, and from there it was a short sail on to Tahiti. When the Hockulay arrived at the beach in Papeete Harbor, more than 17,000 people came to meet her. Over half the entire population of the island. They pressed down to the water, chanting and weeping and celebrating, feeling something ancient and almost lost come alive again, arriving on the wind and the swell after a silence of centuries. One crew member later wrote that it was a spontaneous affirmation of a great shared heritage, and a renewal of the spirit of who we are today. A wave of cultural renaissance spread across the entire Pacific from that single arrival. In Hawaii, a new generation felt the pull of their ancestry with fresh urgency and pride. The Hawaiian language, long suppressed and fading, was revived with new energy and new institutional support. Immersion schools where all subjects were taught in Hawaiian began to appear across the islands. Traditional dance and chant were studied and preserved and passed on with new seriousness. Canoe building traditions that had seemed completely lost were carefully reconstructed from old records and the memories of elders. New canoes were built on ancient principles, and new crews learned to sail them. This was not nostalgia. It was survival. The recognition that a culture without its own language and traditions and stories is a culture in danger, and that the Hockulay had demonstrated in the most powerful possible way that those traditions were not lost forever but only waiting to be reclaimed. The cultural anthropologist Ben Finney, one of the founders of the Polynesian Voyaging Society, later wrote that the Hockulay's voyages had accomplished something no academic argument could have accomplished. They had proven through action and presence that the ancient Polynesian navigators were exactly what the oral traditions said they were: masters of the sea, deliberate and skilled, capable of crossing an ocean and returning. And that proof had changed everything. A young man named Nainoa Thompson, watching the Hockulay return from Tahiti, felt the call with particular force. He had grown up in Hawaii with a father who spoke of the ancient navigators with reverence and love, but the knowledge had seemed unreachable, something lost too completely to be recovered. Now he knew it was possible. He found his way to Mao, and asked to be taught. Mao's response was simple and direct. He said, "I will train you to find Tahiti, because I do not want you to die." He had heard that Eddie Aikaw, a beloved Hawaiian waterman and crew member of the Hockulay, had been lost at sea when the canoe capsized during a second voyage attempt in 1978, and something in Mao had shifted, a deep sense of responsibility for these people who were attempting to sail in the old way without the knowledge that could keep them safe. The training that followed was years-long and extraordinarily demanding. Nainoa spent time with Mao at sea, learning to feel the swells, learning to read the sky, learning to carry the star compass in his mind through every hour of every night. He also spent countless hours alone at a planetarium in Honolulu, lying on the floor in the artificial darkness while the ceiling turned above him, watching the stars rise and set, watching and watching and watching until the positions of hundreds of stars became as familiar as the view from his own window. He studied with Wilkeselka, a lecturer at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu who had spent years studying celestial navigation and who helped Nainoa understand the mathematics and geometry underlying the traditional methods. And in the course of this deep independent study, he independently reconstructed much of what Mao had been trying to teach him. When Mao saw Nainoa's recreated Hawaiian star compass, with its 32 houses and its Hawaiian names for the cardinal and intercardinal directions, he recognized it immediately as the same system he had been trying to explain. Nainoa had not copied it. He had rediscovered it. Because the logic of the ocean is universal. The stars rise in the same houses whether you learn them in Satowal or in Honolulu or in Tahiti 1,000 years ago. And this rediscovery was itself meaningful. It confirmed something important, that this was not arbitrary knowledge specific to one culture or one tradition. It was knowledge grounded in the actual behavior of the sky and the sea, knowledge that any sufficiently careful and dedicated observer would eventually find their way to. In 1980, Nainoa Thompson navigated the Hakulei from Hawaii to Tahiti without instruments, and back again, the first native Hawaiian to complete such a voyage in more than 600 years. And the Hawaiian Renaissance caught fire. In the years and decades that followed, the Hakulei sailed hundreds of thousands of miles, to New Zealand and Easter Island in Japan, through Micronesia and Melanesia, across waters that had not seen a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe in centuries. And in the years between 2014 and 2017, the Hakulei completed a full circumnavigation of the Earth, always navigated by the old ways, always following the stars and the swells and the birds. In March of 2007, Mau Pielug presided over the first Po ceremony on Satowal in 56 years, and inducted 16 new master navigators including Nainoa Thompson and his own son Cesario Surler. The knowledge had been passed on, not to a handful of people on 2 tiny coral islands, but to hundreds of navigators across the entire Pacific. Mau passed away on the 12th of July in 2010, on his home island of Satowal, at the age of 78. He left behind not extinction but abundance. Hundreds of trained navigators carrying the knowledge of the swells and the stars, carrying the long memory of the ocean, sailing under the same stars that guided the first canoes out of Taiwan 5,000 years ago. The ocean was speaking again. And there were people who knew how to listen. Feel the quiet around you now, the deep warmth of rest. Your body is heavy and still. Your thoughts are slow and gentle and far away. The story is drawing toward its close. And sleep is very close now. Let us go back now, to the ocean. To the open Pacific on a quiet night. You are there, drifting on the surface of the largest ocean on Earth, lying on the warm deck of an ancient canoe, the wood warm beneath you from the day's sun, the twin hulls rocking gently in the long slow swell, the sail furled for the night, nothing but the breathing of the ocean beneath you and the breathing of the sky above. Above you, the entire sky is stars. Not just stars as you usually see them, but stars so thick and so brilliant that the sky seems to have weight and warmth, a presence. The Milky Way blazes from one horizon to the other like a river of spilled light, and each individual star is steady and clear and somehow close. Close enough that if you reached up, you could almost touch the ones nearest the horizon. Breathe in the smell of the ocean at night, salt and warmth and something ancient in the deep water far below, something mineral and alive. The canoe moves beneath you, rising softly over each swell, a long slow rhythm like breathing, like the breathing you are doing right now, slowly in, slowly out. There are no voices tonight, just the soft sound of water against the twin hulls, the faintest creak of the coconut fiber lashing as the crossbeams flex in the swell, the whisper of the furled sail moving slightly in the trade wind. The night air is warm, just warm enough, the temperature that means you are deep in the tropics, close to the equator, in the great warm belt of the Pacific where the trade winds are consistent and the stars hang especially low. The navigator sits at the stern in the darkness, watching the stars rise from the arriving horizon, watching them arc and set into the entering horizon, feeling the swell through the wood beneath, holding the entire ocean in their mind like a vast and luminous map. You are safe here. You are drifting. Let your body be completely still now, completely heavy, each limb released and sinking, your face relaxed and soft, your hands lying open like flowers, your breath slow and easy and unforced as the long swells beneath the canoe. Somewhere far below you in the deep dark water, there may be a faint flash of light, Te Lapa, moving steadily in one direction, pointing toward a shore you cannot yet see, but that is there, that has always been there, patient and still and waiting. The stars will slowly overhead. The Southern Cross turns in its patient arc in the south, one arm of the cross pointing down toward the horizon, telling the navigator their latitude, telling you in this dreaming place exactly where you are. You are here. You are resting. The ocean carries you. Breathe out, and let the last remaining tension in your body dissolve into the warm darkness. Let it go the way foam dissolves back into the sea, easily, without effort, without even noticing it go. The night is very long. There are thousands of stars above you and thousands of meters of ocean below you, and the canoe is so small and so safe within it all, a tiny vessel of wood and lashing crossing an ocean that breathes like a sleeping animal beneath it. The wood of the deck is slightly warm beneath your back, the warmth absorbed from the day's sun still releasing slowly into the cool of the night, like a stone that holds heat long after the fire has gone. The lashing that holds the crossbeams creaks just faintly, a small, regular sound, almost a note, almost musical, the canoe singing to itself as it moves. The wind on your face is warm and constant, the northeast trade, the same wind that has been blowing across this part of the Pacific for 10,000 years, the same wind that filled the sails of every canoe that ever made this crossing, the same wind that carried your ancestors across this water before you were born. You are not alone on this ocean. You have never been alone on this ocean. All those canoes that came before you are still here in some sense. their wakes long dissolved but their routes still written in the knowledge of the navigators, in the songs that describe the star sequences, in the chants that list the birds to watch for and the cloud formations to expect. They sailed here. And they arrived. And so will you. Picture the navigator at the stern one more time, sitting still as the stars turn, one hand resting lightly on the steering paddle, sensing the direction of the swell through the wood, their mind holding the whole ocean like a map made of memory and touch in starlight. A star rises in the house of the turn, south-southeast, steady and clear. The swell is unchanged. The wind is the same. Everything is as it should be. Somewhere in the great blue distance, past the horizon and past the horizon beyond that, other canoes are sailing under these same stars, other navigators reading this same sky. Children on distant islands are lying in the dark learning the names of the stars their grandparents taught them. Songs are being sung that are also maps. The knowledge moves through time like a swell through water, patient, persistent, never lost. Think of those 17,000 people who rushed to the shore at Papeete when the Hockulay came in from the sea. Feeling something ancient and almost lost come home. It was never truly gone. It was only waiting. Waiting in the memory of the stars, waiting in the direction of the swells, waiting in the flight path of the birds at evening, waiting in the hands of 6 old men on 2 tiny islands in the Caroline Sea who had not yet died. Waiting for someone to ask the right question. And to commit to the answer. Breathe slowly, in and out. The stars are turning. The ocean is breathing. The canoe is carrying you gently onward. The houses of the stars are open tonight. Hikina and Komohana, the arriving and the entering. East and west. The swell is rolling from the southeast, patient and consistent, the same swell that has been rolling for 1,000 years, and will roll for 1,000 more. The navigator makes a small adjustment to the steering paddle, barely a change at all, just a slight shift of angle in the water, correcting for a drift so subtle that no one else on the canoe has felt it. But the navigator felt it. The navigator always feels it. Let your eyes stop moving behind their closed lids. Let your thoughts lose their edges. Let them blur and soften and float free without catching on anything. You are drifting. The ocean is ancient and kind and infinite. And you are a very small and very peaceful part of it tonight. The stars are turning. The ocean is breathing. And you are almost home. The story is settling now. Like the ocean settling after a long voyage. Like a canoe coming to rest in a quiet harbor, the sail coming down, the deck growing still, the motion of the sea already becoming a memory. You may already be nearly asleep. That is exactly right. You have followed the stars tonight across thousands of years and thousands of kilometers of open ocean. From Taiwan to Tahiti, from Samoa to Hawaii, from the tide pools of Satowal to the blazing night sky over the deep Pacific. You can let it all go now. Let the story drift out of your mind the way foam drifts off the surface of the sea, easy, effortless, without holding on. You have nothing to do now. Nothing to remember. Nothing to carry. The stars are still turning above the Pacific tonight, real stars, over a real ocean that is breathing right now on the other side of the world, the same stars that guided the ancient canoes from one side of the Earth's largest ocean to the other. And as they turn, they are watching over you too. Every exhale carries you a little further from the surface, a little deeper into the quiet dark. Your body is still. So still. Warm and safe. Held by the bed beneath you the way an island is held by the ocean, secure, permanent, at rest. The swells are long and slow. The night is very deep. Let every muscle release, let every thought loosen, let the weight of the whole day drift away from your body like a canoe cast free from its mooring. You have arrived. Somewhere in the dark water below the dreaming surface, there is a faint flash of light, Te Lapa, pointing towards something just beyond knowing. Follow it if you like. It will take you to sleep. Breathe in. And breathe out. And rest now. Good night. Sleep well. You are safe here. The ocean is carrying you home. The stars are turning. And the night is yours. Slowly. Gently. Rest.